If you are over 50 and you have been told that your fatigue, your digestive discomfort, your foggy thinking, your stubborn inflammation, that all of it is just part of aging, I need to tell you something that a Jewish physician wrote over 800 years ago. Something so precise, so medically accurate, that when I first read it as a trained doctor at Hebrew University, I had to put the book down and sit with it for a long moment, because this man, writing with a quill in 12th century Egypt, had identified the exact mechanism behind most of the chronic illness we see today, and he had identified the solution. And somewhere between then and now, modern medicine decided to look the other way. My name is Dr. Sarah Levine. I am 68 years old. I trained at the Hadassah Medical School at Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and I have spent over 40 years in preventive medicine, working with women's health in Israel and New York and here in Boca Raton, Florida. But the most important education I ever received did not come from a university. It came from my grandmother, Rachel, who lived in Łódź, Poland, survived what she survived, came to Brooklyn with almost nothing, and lived to 98 years old without a single prescription medication until she was 90. What I'm going to share with you today is part of a system I have spent 4 decades documenting. I call it the 7 Jewish Laws of Longevity. Today I'm focusing on the law that Maimonides articulated so clearly in 1190, the law that most doctors today have never read, let alone applied. And toward the end of this teaching, I'm going to share something specific that my grandmother Rachel told me, something she only ever discussed with women she deeply trusted. Stay with me because it may be the most important thing you hear this year. This is one of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity that I've spent 40 years documenting. And it begins with a man who was both a rabbi and a physician, the greatest mind to ever sit at the intersection of medicine and Jewish wisdom. I first encountered Maimonides, Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, known also as the Rambam, not in a medical textbook, but in my grandmother Rachel's kitchen in Brooklyn on a Friday night. She kept a worn copy of his writings on the shelf between her prayer book and her recipe notebooks. The pages were soft from handling, and she had marked certain passages with small pieces of torn paper. I was in my early 20s, home from Jerusalem for the holidays, and I asked her why she kept a medieval rabbi on a kitchen shelf. She looked at me with those eyes that had seen too much and said, "He knew how the body worked before anyone had the words for it." I smiled. I was a young medical student. I thought I knew better. It was not until I was 45 years old, sitting in my own office in Boca Raton with test results that looked perfectly normal on paper, while my body was falling apart from the inside. The chronic fatigue that no amount of sleep repaired, the inflammation in my joints, the mental fog that made reading patient files feel like pushing through wet concrete, that I remembered what she said. I pulled Maimonides off my own shelf. I opened his Regimen of Health, which he wrote in 1198 for the son of Sultan Saladin, and I found the warning, the one that stopped me cold. Before I share exactly what it says and what it means for your body right now, I want to ask you to do something. Type something in the comments below. Type, "I am willing to hear what medicine forgot." Just those words. Because what I'm about to share asks something of you. Not a complicated protocol, not expensive supplements. It asks you to be willing to see your body the way our ancestors saw it, as a system that has wisdom built into it and as a vessel that is not yours to neglect. Once you're willing to see it that way, everything I teach in these 7 laws becomes possible. Here's what is happening to women over 50 right now in this country. According to the Centers for Disease Control, nearly 60% of American adults are living with at least one chronic disease. 60%. And among women over 50, the numbers are starker. The majority are managing some combination of inflammatory conditions, hormonal dysregulation, metabolic disruption, digestive dysfunction, or cognitive decline, often all at once. These are not rare diagnoses. These are the baseline experience of being a woman in the second half of her life in the modern Western world. And what does the conventional medical system offer? A medication for each symptom, a specialist for each organ, a referral for the fatigue, a different referral for the joint pain, a prescription for sleep, another for mood, each system of your body treated as if it has nothing to do with the others, as if you are a collection of parts rather than an integrated living whole. This is exactly what Maimonides warned against, not in vague spiritual terms. In precise medical language that reads 8 centuries later, like a critique written specifically for our moment. In his Mishneh Torah, in the section known as Hilchot Deot, the laws of human dispositions, Maimonides wrote that most illnesses that afflict human beings come from one of two sources, either from harmful foods or from filling the stomach beyond its need. He called overeating a root cause. He called digestive disruption the beginning of systemic disease. He wrote that the physician who treats the symptom without addressing what enters the body is like a gardener who keeps cutting weeds without ever reaching the root. Does that sound familiar? It should, because in 2025, researchers at institutions including Harvard Medical School and the National Institutes of Health are publishing study after study confirming that systemic inflammation, the underlying driver of heart disease, cognitive decline, autoimmune conditions, and accelerated aging, originates in significant part from the gut. The gut microbiome, the integrity of the intestinal lining, the inflammatory signals that travel from the digestive system to every organ, including the brain. This is what Maimonides was describing in the 12th century. He just called it by a different name. He also wrote something that most people have never heard because most doctors have never read it. He wrote that the physician's highest obligation is not to cure disease, but to teach people how not to become sick in the first place. Prevention not as a side note. Prevention as the primary work of medicine. He wrote this explicitly. No disease that can be treated by diet should be treated by any other means. Let me say that again because I want you to feel the weight of it. No disease that can be treated by diet should be treated by any other means. That is not a holistic wellness influencer speaking. That is the personal physician to the Sultan of Egypt, a man who also served as head of the Jewish community in Cairo, one of the most rigorous intellectual minds of the medieval world, writing his clinical philosophy for a royal patient. And modern medicine has quietly set it aside. Why? My grandmother Rachel had a theory about this, and I have come to believe she was right. She used to say that wisdom which requires patience does not survive in a system that profits from speed. A prescription takes minutes. Teaching someone how to eat, how to rest, how to tend their body as a sacred system, that takes time. It takes relationship. It takes a physician who sits with you the way a grandmother sits with her granddaughter, not the way a timer runs down in an examination room. This is where the 7 Jewish laws of longevity come from, not from wellness culture, not from trend cycles, from a 3,000-year tradition of treating the body as Tselem Elohim, made in the image of the divine, and therefore as something that carries an obligation. We call it Shmirat Haguf, the religious duty to guard the body, not as an aesthetic choice, as a covenant. Now, I want to go deeper into the specific warning Maimonides wrote and what it means for Law 3 of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity, because this is the law most directly connected to what he documented. Law 3 is what I call the law of clean foods. In the tradition, it is rooted in kashrut, the Jewish dietary laws that most people understand only as religious rules about which animals to avoid, and how to prepare meat. But Maimonides revealed something that the Jewish community has carried internally for centuries. The kashrut system is also a metabolic protocol. It is a framework designed to reduce the burden on the digestive system, to introduce natural fasting intervals into daily eating patterns, to eliminate categories of food that Maimonides observed, clinically observed in his patients, produced inflammation, heaviness, and shortened vitality. He wrote specifically about timing. He was adamant that the body needs intervals of emptiness, periods in which the digestive system completes its work fully before new food enters. This is not intermittent fasting as modern wellness culture invented it. This is what Jewish law has encoded for millennia. The structure of kashrut creates natural breaks between protein and dairy that function as enforced digestive intervals. The rhythm of Shabbat, or from Friday evening to Saturday night, creates a weekly reset that affects not just the spirit but the metabolic system. Maimonides wrote that a person who eats before the previous meal has been fully digested is filling a vessel that is not yet empty. He called this the beginning of internal disorder. Today, researchers studying the gut microbiome at the University of California, San Diego, and at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel, and I take particular pride in that, and have confirmed that the gut lining requires periods of rest between digestive cycles to repair, to regenerate the mucus layer that protects against systemic inflammation, and to allow the beneficial bacterial populations to reestablish balance. The science has a term for this: the migrating motor complex, a cleaning wave that sweeps through the digestive system during periods of fasting. It only activates when the stomach is empty. Maimonides described this same phenomenon using the language of his time. He said the body knows how to heal itself, but only if you give it silence. His warning, the one doctors ignore, is this: the body speaks before it breaks. Fatigue is a message. Digestive discomfort is a message. Brain fog is a message. These are not inconveniences to be managed with the appropriate pharmaceutical. They are signals from a system that is asking for something. And what it is asking for, more often than not, is not another medication. It is rest. It is intervals, it is clean food, it is the removal of the burden that we keep placing on it faster than it can recover. My grandmother Rachel never ate past 7 in the evening, not because she was dieting, because her mother had taught her, and her mother's mother before that the body does its most important repair work in the hours of darkness, and it cannot do that work while it is still processing dinner. She would have her last meal, clear the table, and then she would say what her mother used to say: "Now we give the body back to God for the night." I thought it was beautiful language. At 45, when my own body was struggling and I finally stopped eating after 6:30 and gave my digestive system its first true overnight interval in years, I understood it was also medicine. Here is what the science confirms happens when women over 50 implement consistent overnight digestive rest of at least 12 hours. Within 7 days, most women report measurable improvement in morning energy and mental clarity. Within 3 weeks, markers of systemic inflammation begin to shift. Within 40 days, the biblical period of transformation, 40 days in the desert, 40 days of rain, 40 days in which the body remakes itself. The changes in gut microbiome composition are significant enough to show up in clinical testing. I want to be very clear with you as a physician. I am not promising you a cure. I am not telling you this replaces your doctor or your prescribed medications. What I am telling you is what Maimonides told his royal patient 8 centuries ago. The body has a wisdom built into it, And the first obligation of medicine is to stop interfering with that wisdom and start working with it. There is a second part of this law, the part about what you eat during the hours that you are eating, that my grandmother always taught alongside the timing practice. Without it, what I've shared today is only half as effective. I will share that in a coming teaching because the specifics of what Maimonides called foods that illuminate the mind and what modern nutritional science confirms as neuroprotective and anti-inflammatory deserve their own full conversation. I will tell you this. It involves three specific foods that appear in both the Torah and in Maimonides' clinical writings. Foods that were present in the blue zones before researchers knew what a blue zone was. Foods that Jewish grandmothers have been putting on Shabbat tables for 1,000 years without needing a research study to tell them why. I want to be honest with you about something. There was a period in my late 50s when the demands of my practice, the travel, the speaking, the writing, I let my own practices slip. I stopped observing my overnight intervals consistently. I began eating quickly on schedule without presence. My digestion suffered, my sleep deteriorated, my thinking became slower in ways I told myself were stress, but which I knew, if I was being truthful, were the consequence of a body I had stopped tending. I tell you this not because I enjoy vulnerability, but because I want you to understand that these laws are not a judgment. They are not a standard of perfection. They are a direction. And every woman I have ever worked with, every woman who has written to me from Georgia or from London or from Tel Aviv to say that something in her health finally shifted, every single one of them began, not by doing everything right, but by turning slightly, consistently toward the wisdom. That is what my grandmother Rachel called teshuva in the context of health. Returning, not succeeding, returning. We live in a time when the chronic disease epidemic is accelerating in ways that should alarm every thinking person. We live in a time when women over 50 are the fastest growing demographic seeking answers outside of conventional medicine. Not because they are anti-science, but because the science as it has been practiced has not been meeting them. Maimonides wrote his health warning in 1190. We are in 2025. The warning has never been more relevant. What I have shared with you today is one law of the seven. And I say this with the full understanding that one law applied alone will give you results. I have seen it happen. But I have also spent 4 decades watching women apply pieces of ancient wisdom in isolation, get some improvement, plateau, and wonder why. My grandmother did not teach these practices as separate tips. She taught them as a system. She said the 7 practices together are like 7 candles. Each one gives light. But light them all and you can see the whole room. The women who have transformed their health in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, the ones who write to me and say they feel better at 65 than they did at 45, they are not the ones who found the one right supplement or the perfect morning routine. They are the ones who understood that the body is a system and that it responds to a system of care. Here is what I want you to take from today. First, your body is not aging against you. It is communicating with you. The fatigue, the digestive discomfort, the inflammation, the fog, these are messages, not sentences. Second, Maimonides was right. Most of what harms us comes from what we put in our bodies and how much. The modern version of this is the gut microbiome, the inflammatory cascade, the metabolic disruption that begins in the digestive system and spreads outward. Same truth, different language. Third, the oldest Jewish health tradition is not a religious obligation disconnected from your life. It is a practical system, tested over 3 millennia, validated now by modern science. for keeping the body that was entrusted to you in the condition it deserves. In our tradition, the body is not yours to neglect. It is a gift given to you in trust. Tselem Elohim, made in the image of the divine. To tend it is not vanity, it is faithfulness. In my next teaching, I will share another of the 7 laws, one that most women over 50 have been doing exactly backwards without ever being told. It is the law that Maimonides placed first in his Regimen of Health, before diet, before sleep, before everything else. And when I share it, most of you will recognize it immediately because your grandmothers knew it, even if no one ever explained why it was the first thing. If this teaching has given you something today, I ask 2 things of you. Subscribe and turn on notifications so that you receive each of these teachings as I share them, and leave a comment below. Tell me which symptom you are ready to stop accepting as inevitable. I read every comment. I began this work because of one woman's notebooks written in Waj. I continue it because of the women who write to me every day from across the world. You are why this matters. Until next time, l'chaim, to life.